Chapter 19. Interstellar Space Station A2712. I think it would be best if someone stayed here and held the position. Baltok nodded. I'll stay here and make sure Luke stays right where he is and doesn't get any stupid ideas. I'll stay here too. David stretched and moved further inside the ship. Then I'll come with you. Tangi walked over to Tavi with smooth steps and took his place beside her. Tavi felt her stomach tighten pleasantly and quickly said, "Okay, then let's head down already. We have half an hour left until the meeting time at the door." They disappeared through the entrance of the ship and went down the stairs. Baltok closed the door from the inside. Stefan left his small room above the bar, where he lived, one hand gripping the strap of the backpack slung over his shoulder. He walked down the stairs, passing the pictures on the walls of landscapes and people from Earth, the place that had fascinated him his entire life. His footsteps echoed across the floor of the bar. Roxy and Ken stood at the door smiling at him. Vika leaned against the wall and gave him a nod. They stepped through the door and Stefan turned around one last time, looking back at his bar, one hand resting on the light switch. Shit. How could something be so hard when it was what he had always wanted, more than anything? Goodbye. The light switch clicked, the lights went out, and the four of them set off towards Acist. A while later they stood in the shadows of the dark buildings surrounding Acist, far enough away not to be noticed in their black clothings, staring intently at the entrance door and the patrolling star cars that moved around the institute with their humming sound. Stefan pulled the collar of his black jacket tighter around his neck. Despite the protective suit, the icy cold of the darkness seeped through the fabric, through his skin, down to his bones. He rubbed his hands together in vain and clung to his large backpack. It was the only thing he would take with him. "Where is she?" Roxy whispered. "I don't know," Stefan replied, staring at the door, which suddenly moved open just enough to break the line of the frame, almost unnoticeable. Kent was just about to run towards the door when Stefan held him back. "Wait, we have to wait until the Starcar patrol leaves an opening. Wait until they all disappear behind a corner." All four of them stared fixedly at the Starcars. But every time one vanished behind the corner, another appeared on the other side of the building. 15 minutes passed. "How did Tavi and Lux even get past them?" Vika breathed. "We need patience," Roxy said, without taking her eyes off the Starcars. When the last of them disappeared behind the corner and Ken shouted, "Run!" Without hesitating, they sprinted towards the door as fast as they could and threw themselves against it with all their strength. They stumbled over each other, crashing into the narrow basement room. Tavi, standing a few meters from the door beside Tangi, flinched as they burst in. At the same moment, she noticed a bright light outside. Fuck, a Starcar. Tangi ran to the door and slammed it shut. "Did they see us?" Stefan asked as he pulled himself back to his feet. "I have no idea." They locked the door from the inside and pushed the cabinet back in front of it. Then they crossed the large basement room towards the exit and stepped into the dark corridor. Suddenly a deafening alarm blared, shaking them to the core. Fuck. I think that answers your question. They began to walk faster. Their footsteps echoed across the floor of the corridor. They had just turned into the hallway that led to the door to the ship when, beneath the sound of their own steps, they heard others behind them, coming closer, fast. "Up ahead!" a man's voice shouted, and they broke into a run as fast as they could. "Stop immediately!" When they reached the door, Tavi pressed her card against the reader with trembling hands. It beeped, and the door slid open. They sprinted towards the ship, up the stairs, and rattled the door. Fuck, Baltok! Apparently he had locked it from the inside. She turned and saw 3 security men rushing through the doorway. "Stop!" they shouted, and one of them reached for his belt and pulled out a weapon. Stefan pushed to the front and slammed his fists against the ship's door with all his strength. "Open up!" The security guards had just reached the lower part of the stairs when a clicking sound and a hiss filled the air. Before the heavy door had fully slid aside, The 6 of them squeezed into the ship, shoving the door and Baltog roughly out of the way, before forcing it shut again with all their strength. A loud gunshot rang out, and a bullet ricocheted off the closing door. Moments after they locked it, furious fists were already pounding against it. "Open it right now!" Stefan turned on Baltog, furious. "Have you lost your mind?" he shouted. "We could have all been killed." Baltog stood there, looking hurt. The usually self-assured giant of a man now looked like a small child. "Sorry, boss," he said quietly. "Start the engines!" Tavi shouted, pushing past them. Tangi ran to the cockpit. The interior of the ship was ice cold, the silver walls freezing to the touch, but none of them noticed the fog of their breath or the biting cold around them. Adrenaline drowned it all out. "Start the engines!" Tavi screamed again as the security guards kept slamming their fists against the door, shouting words she couldn't make out. Her heart was pounding in her throat when a deep, dark rumble filled the ship, growing into a deafening roar. She pressed her hands against her ears, struggling to keep her balance as the ship began to shake and move. She fought her way upwards to where Tangi was, frantically pressing buttons. "The gate isn't open," he shouted, turning toward her. She looked out the window and saw the security personnel calling for reinforcements. "We don't have time," Vika screamed. "You have to start. Ram the gate and fly through it." Tangi's eyes were fixed on the massive gate in front of them. "Are you sure?" he shouted. "Do it!" they yelled as one. Tangi shoved the large lever forward. "Hold tight!" he screamed. The sudden burst of acceleration threw everyone to the floor. They were hurled backwards, rolling across the metal surface like tumbleweed. Tavi tumbled helplessly, trying to grab onto something, anything, but there was nothing to hold onto. Her head struck the ground hard. After minutes that felt like an eternity, the motion steadied. The roar softened. She pushed herself up, rubbing her head. Everything hurt, her shoulders, her legs, but she was alive. And she was in a spaceship. She couldn't believe they had made it. Everyone slowly got to their feet, rubbing their heads. "Are you okay?" They nodded. She hurried to the front of the ship, where Tangi was still sitting in his seat. "You made it! You fucking made it!" she screamed. She turned around, beaming, and looked into the faces of the others, some stunned, some tense. Tavi let out a piercing scream of relief. For a brief second there was confusion. Then the others joined in, laughing, as they threw their arms around each other. Suddenly Tavi felt tears running down her cheeks, and wiped them away with a sniff. "This is everything we've worked towards these past days. The first stage is done. There's no turning back now. We shouldn't celebrate too soon." Tangi's voice cut in. "We have no idea if we damaged the ship when we passed through the roof." Tavi sat down in the captain's seat beside him. Ken stood behind her and patted her shoulder excitedly. "I can't believe we're actually doing this. I'm so proud and so happy. We're practically pioneers right now." "And quite criminal," Roxy added, "which is exactly why we should get out of here as fast as possible." "You better sit down and buckle up now." Vika and Stefan had already taken their seats. The rest quickly followed. Full power. With a jolt, the machine surged upwards. Baltog looked down through one of the windows and saw that the staircase had tipped to the side and a man was lying on the ground. The hall below was now filled with more people staring up at them, growing smaller and smaller. They rose faster and faster, straight up into the darkness. The floodlights of the spaceship were at full power, but against the blackness of space they were useless. Tavi adjusted the engines from vertical thrust to horizontal thrust, and they began moving through the endless dark. "How do you know where we are going?" Roxy asked, breaking the silence that had settled over the ship. "Do you see that small but bright star back there? That's the sun. In its orbit are 8 planets, and one of them is Earth. Soon we'll enter interdimensional space, where time and space behave differently than in the dimension we know. That will allow us to cross vast distances in a short time, and in about 2 weeks we will be there." Her trembling hands and racing heart slowly began to calm. She took a deep breath. After some time, the interstellar space station was nothing more than a small glowing dot blending into the countless other stars and galaxies that filled the space around them. They all stood silently, gazing out of the windows. "It's a shame you couldn't convince Lux to come with us," Stefan said at last. "Fuck, Lux." Tavi hurried to the storage room and looked through the small window. Lux was sitting on the floor, a large wound visible at his temple. Without hesitation, Tavi unlocked the door. Lux looked up at her, fury in his eyes. "Lux, I'm so sorry." He jumped to his feet and shoved her aside to push past her. "Hey, Lux," Stefan called, but Lux kept walking to one of the small cabins that served as sleeping quarters for passengers. He slammed the door shut and locked it from the inside. Tavi slowly returned to the others. "Give him some time," Stefan murmured, turning back to the window. "It can't be easy for him." "I think it's about time to enter interdimensional space," David said. "What exactly happens when we do that?" Venka asked hesitantly. "The principle is simple. In our dimension, all matter vibrates within the same fundamental frequency range. Every form of matter, from a grain of dust to a star, from a table to a living being, vibrates imperceptibly within this exact resonance band of space-time. It is this shared frequency that defines our dimension. As long as an object vibrates within our frequency band, it belongs to this reality, to our dimension. This ship contains a core that can do more than generate energy. It can synchronize different vibration. Field after field forms around the hull, reaching for every atom in the metal, every molecule in our blood and bones, forcing them into coherence and then slowly shifting them into a new frequency. There will be no rift opening in space, no space tunnel forming. Instead, this ship will simply change its and our frequency and with that glide out of its dimension's resonance band. It will lose its coupling to this dimension and transition into another, one which space-time behaves differently. A dimension where we can travel from A to B far more quickly. Once we've traveled through that dimension and arrived near Earth, we will shift the ship's frequency back to that of our dimension and reappear. At last, that's the theory." "Will it hurt?" Venka asked. "I don't know. We'll be the first." Then there was silence. "And you're sure the coordinates are correct?" Tavi asked David and Tangi for reassurance. "We checked everything 3 times. It should be all right." The group had gathered around the cockpit, watching tensely. Everything was ready to activate the ship's core and begin the frequency transition into the other dimension. "Maybe we should tell Lux," Tavi said hesitantly. "You lied to him, lured him onto the ship, and locked him up in the cargo hold. Let him process that first. I wouldn't feel like talking to you either," Stefan said. "He'd probably just cause trouble anyway." It felt awful, but Stefan was right. "Then I'll get started," Tangi said. "Any last words?" He looked at Tavi. Then he slowly pushed the lever forward. A high-pitched tone filled the ship, growing louder and louder. They pressed their hands to their ears and flinched. Tavi grew dizzy. She couldn't feel her hands anymore. She looked around and saw everything beginning to blur. A sharp pain pierced her temple as if someone had driven a dagger into the side of her head. She heard screams and saw Baltar collapse on the floor. Then the world tilted and she lost consciousness.